my question also, in some of my research and things like that, can you speak to us about the Electoral College and how slaves um, were involved with this decision of Electoral College?
Well, the South certainly did not. The South and the slaveholding states certainly didn't want to give up a whole lot of ground. That's for sure. I mean, let's go all the way back to the North-South Compromise and the question of counting people for the census for the purpose of apportioning the House of Representatives. The North did not want slaves counted at all. The South did. If slaves were counted in the population, and certainly slaves were not going to be able to vote or stand for public office, this increases the number of the population in the South. This is certainly going to help the South when it comes to money bills and appropriations and things of that sort. So they came to this, what was called the 3/5 compromise, where slaves would, and I don't think this was an arbitrary number, the slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person. Oh, well, that kind of fit the paradigm back then. This whole idea that the African slave was not completely human in the first place. So I suppose that they would count Black folks as 3/5 of a human being. But part of the Electoral College in that regard, as you mentioned, was to preserve slavery and the slaveholding power. The South simply did not want to give up this, their power, their position, their privilege, and anything that even hinted at the fact that you would have popular election of the president certainly was going to point in that direction.
Dr. Clardy, I want to also ask you, moving into counting and things of this nature, Georgia is on my mind, okay?
Yes.
And, Trump going around talking about all of this fraud. The election has already been certified. He is the president-elect.
Mm-hmm.
Has anything like this ever happened before, or has it happened anywhere before? And then the other thing I jot down right here that I wanted to ask you, how do you think this runoff is going to end up? And I do have a third question, a third part of the question for you as well.
Getting back to, has a candidate for office ever protested the results of the Electoral College or the results of a presidential election to where they made a lot of hay out of it? The closest I can think of is the election of 1824. This is when Andrew Jackson won the popular vote in 1824, did not win a majority in the Electoral College. The race was thrown to the House. Henry Clay, of course, drops out, supports John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams wins the 1824 election. And for the next 4 years, Andrew Jackson is going to run around yelling about corrupt bargain. And he's going to use that as the basis of running in 1828. And certainly he did so. And he won. Certainly in 1960, of course, there was a lot of question about what happened in Illinois and in Texas, those two states which helped give John Kennedy the election in 1960. And of course, there was a lot of huge, big brouhaha about that. Of course, that kind of went away. What President Trump is doing is not only dangerous and irresponsible, but it threatens to undo democracy itself. It is race baiting 101, plain and simple. Because if you listen to some of his screeds since the last election, and some of the places where he ordered recounts, where were they? They were in places where you had large majority African-American populations, which voted heavily for Joe Biden. He criticized the election results in Wisconsin. Of course, he won that in 2016. He lost it in 2020, in part because you had a huge African-American turnout in Milwaukee. He did the same thing in Michigan, same thing, Detroit, huge Black population. And now Georgia, which has been certified again after another recount. So what is the subtext behind this? Atlanta, Black population. Rural Georgia, huge Black population. It just seemed to me that President Trump, go figure, criticized and was very, very ugly about the election results in places where you had huge, massive Black voter turnout, that did not support him, and he lost the election. That wasn't just racial dog whistle. And what we heard last night in Georgia wasn't racial dog whistle. It was huge, full-on bullhorn. And so what that's going to do is going to undermine a lot of confidence in elections, in democracy itself.